Hopefully, you're getting the feel of how it works to be modifying your website using child themes. I'm going to show you a couple more things that we can do using CSS to wrangle our web page into looking exactly how we want it to. I will primarily be focusing on the home page, but obviously some of the things that we're going to be editing would have global ramifications throughout the entire website. It's important that you're checking every single page so that you can ensure that whatever it is that you're doing will not impact other areas of your website. I'll go ahead and open up my developer tools. When you have the developer tools active, if you use this select an element icon, you can basically click on any element and it will find that element in your HTML. In the lower part of the developer tools, it's going to show you the CSS that's associated with that particular element. And you can scroll through the code and select any element within the code to see the associated CSS that is responsible for styling that element. We're going to be focusing on our navigation right now. The navigation looks good at the large screen size, but I do have some things that I want to augment as my site gets smaller. You can see around the mid-range size, my navigational elements break onto 2 lines. I am not a fan of this. And then, of course, the hamburger menu is going to kick in. What I want to do is I want the hamburger menu to appear sooner on my web page so I don't have the links breaking awkwardly onto 2 lines. In order to do this, we'll be modifying our CSS. To make it a little bit easier for me to read all of the various classes that are associated with the particular elements, I'm going to augment how the developer tools displays in the browser. If you go to the 3 dots right here, you can control where the developer tools will be situated. So I'm going to dock them to the bottom of the page, and I'll go ahead and give the CSS a little bit more real estate, and I will give the code area a little bit more real estate as well. This will just ensure as I'm looking through the document tree and viewing these various elements, I will be able to more easily read the classes. When this page is a little bit more narrow, the classes are still there, but they break into multiple lines, and sometimes it can make it a little tougher to understand exactly what they are. We'll begin by changing our hamburger menu. I want the hamburger menu to look a little bit differently. I'm going to style it so that it is a little bit more predominant, and we're going to use colors that work with the brand of our website. The hamburger menu item is currently controlled by this button right here. You can see that this element has a class of w-block-navigation __ responsive container open. I'm going to double click and copy this class. And now I'll jump into my code editor. On a side note, I've altered my code editor to hopefully make the code a little bit easier for you to be able to view. Other than that, everything else is pretty much the same. When I'm making styles for my child theme, I use a lot of comments, and this is because the classes are usually somewhat convoluted and don't necessarily have a specific meaning to me. So I like to be very intentional about what I am doing. And I find that adding comments can really help, because if I need to go back and make changes later on, I can more easily find the exact class and or styles that are controlling that element. So what we'll do is we'll start off by targeting the class of the hamburger menu, and I'm going to go ahead and change the background color. The color that we're going to assign is the same color that we're using for our logo and other branding elements in our website. It's this green shade. I'm going to make the hamburger lines appear as white, and I'll add a little bit of padding to this element. I'm going to round the corners slightly by adding a border radius, and I'm going to assign the cursor to pointer just so that it is more obvious that this is a link if you are navigating the website with a mouse. Let's save this. And if we go back to the browser and refresh our page, you can see that now the menu is showing in a different manner. So it's a little bit more obvious as to what the hamburger menu is. It stands out a little bit more, and the target area is easier to hit. When the menu is open, I am not a fan of having the active links be outlined like this, so I'm going to remove that as well. This is a little more difficult to find using the developer tools because when you actually try to select the item, the hamburger menu goes away. But if you look through the DOM of the hamburger menu, you'll see that the actual menu itself is made up of several nested divs, but there is also a UL element, which contains our navigational elements, and each of the LIs contain a link. In order to target the links, I'm going to use the class of WP block navigation, which has been assigned to the nav element, and then I will just get any descendant links from there. Let's jump back into our code editor, and I'll go ahead and make a comment that this rule is to hide the active state of the nav links. I'm going to start off my selector by using the class name of WP block navigation space A. And from here, I will set the border to none. I'm also going to set the outline to none. And if we save this now and go back into our browser and refresh and open the menu, you're going to see that that box now disappears. The next thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to alter when the media query actually kicks in. For this particular theme, the media query occurs at 600 pixels. So anything less than 600 pixels is where the menu is going to display. What I actually want to do is I want to alter this and have the hamburger menu exist until probably about 800 pixels, and then we can go to our full screen menu. If we go ahead and select the various elements of the menu, we can look through and see what is actually controlling those elements. Sometimes it takes a little bit of detective work and looking through the CSS and the DOM so that you can find the particular rules that are in charge of controlling the various elements. It is worth cautioning you that this isn't always completely straightforward, and obviously if you understand the DOM and how CSS works, this whole process is a lot easier. If you are a developer and you understand how to construct a website, you're going to be able to look through the various elements and find the elements that are controlling the particular item that you're interested in. I'm just going to give this a little bit more room. And what I'm looking for right now is I'm looking for the element that has a media query that is basically controlling when the element changes from the mobile menu to the large screen menu. You also may need to alter the page size because some of the CSS isn't going to show unless the page is a specific size. So currently I have this button targeted in my HTML, and at the small screen size, because this was built at mobile first, we just see the CSS that we just made that's assigning the colors to this element and styling it, as well as any other styles that are particular to this element. If I make my page a little bit bigger, then we can find the media query. So this is what I'm looking for right here. Currently, this is a minimum width of 600 pixels, and you can see that this element, the WP block navigation responsive container open, not always shown, it has a display of none. If I turn this rule off, you can see that the hamburger menu will display. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to copy this rule right here, and we're going to tell this element to have a display of block. This will ensure that the menu is going to be present by default. So if we go back to our code editor, and I'll just put a couple more returns to push some of this up so it's easier to see. I'm going to make a comment and we'll say show mobile menu by default. Then I'll go ahead and use that selector. And instead of having a display of none, we're going to change this to a display of block. If we save our page and jump back to our browser and refresh, you can see that now that element is displaying. It's no longer hidden, and obviously it's going to display all the time. We'll eventually have to hide it using a media query, which we will address shortly. But before I do that, I'm going to hide the large screen menu. So I'm going to go ahead and target my large screen menu. And in order to find the large screen menu that we want to target, we probably need to make our page smaller so that we're viewing this at the mobile size. And then I'm just going to look through the DOM area. And I believe this is the rule that we want. So the display here is none. Obviously, if I turn that back on, it's going to appear. We also have some position properties that are putting it in a different area. So that's why when we viewed it at the larger size, it wasn't located at the top. Let's try this as the selector. I may need to put this extra pseudo class on there, but I'm going to start off by just trying this. I will copy this particular selector, jump back into my code editor. I'll make a comment. We'll go ahead and use this selector, and we'll try just doing a display of none. Let's save and go back to the browser. I'll refresh, and now you can see that the large screen menu disappears. So that is actually working the way we want. Obviously, the media query hasn't been altered, so both of these things turn on at the large screen size, which we don't want, but we'll fix that next. Because I know what the selectors are, and I know what I want my media query to be, I probably don't need to find anything in the HTML and CSS. So let's go ahead and let's just make a media query. I'm going to make 2 comments here so that this is a little bit easier for me to keep track of. We'll write our media query in between these. So we're going to use @media. We'll set the min width to 800 pixels. And then I'm going to open my curly braces, and let's just move this navigation comment to be within the media query. Now I'm going to go ahead and target my various elements. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to change basically these 2 elements. We just want to flip these 2 elements. So I'm going to just copy these rules. I'll paste these in, and just to keep things a little bit more tidy, I'm going to indent them so it's easier for me to find these things. And instead of showing the mobile menu, I'm going to hide the mobile menu at large screen. And we're going to show the large screen menu at large screen. So I just need to flip this to be none, and this one will become block. If we save this now and jump back into the browser and refresh our page, you can see that nothing happened. So let's go ahead and let's see what happens above 800. So above 800, that looks good. We don't see the mobile menu, and now our large screen menu is working great, but obviously this is a little bit problematic right here. So between the original less than 600 and our new media query of 800, we just want to hide this element. So what I'll need to do is I'll need to ensure that this menu does not show by default. So I need to use the same selector right here. This is the selector that is controlling the fact that that menu is displaying. So I'm simply going to select this. I'll copy the selector. Let's go back to our code editor, and by default, essentially at the small screen, I want the large screen menu to not show. So I'm just going to try adding a group selector right here. I need to be just as specific as what's happening in WordPress. Let's give this a save now and go back into WordPress and refresh our page. And there you go. So now at the small screen, we have our mobile menu. It's working great. And then when we get to our new breakpoint of 800, the mobile menu will disappear. Because I was more specific, the regular menu is no longer showing, so we'll need to alter that as well in our code editor. I'll go ahead and just add this class to what we had inside our media query. So remember, at the large screen, we want our block navigation, our large menu, to also show. So we'll just add that rule in, save the page. And now when we refresh, we should have the large screen menu, and that will display at large screen sizes. And then obviously anything under 800 is going to show our mobile menu. It does take a little bit of detective work, and it is important that you have a good grasp of CSS and how classes work. Typically, WordPress websites are littered with a bunch of non-semantic elements, a ton of extra classes. This is kind of just the nature of WordPress. So unfortunately, if you are working with pre-made themes, which at this point we're just modifying the theme with our child theme, you will have to go through here and try different things. It is worth mentioning that sometimes if you can't figure something out, you can modify it in the developer tools. So for instance, if I had targeted the hamburger menu and we had already made rules here, but let's just pretend that I wanted to be able to try to make this show, I would find what that selector is. If we go ahead and find that particular selector, we've already identified it. I can go ahead and just try stuff, right? Like I could write a border of solid 2 pixels and I'll just make it red temporarily. I guess we have to spell border right in order for that to work, but you can see that it will apply that change. Now this change is simply temporary. It only exists inside the browser for this particular instance of me viewing the web page. As soon as I click the refresh button, that all goes away. So that border of red disappears, and now my green background color and the white lines come back. Everything displays as it did before. But the advantage of doing it here is that you can kind of play around with stuff and see, hey, if I change this, is it going to control the web page? The more you work with the developer tools and WordPress, the more comfortable you will get in identifying the appropriate hooks for the CSS that you want to use to restructure the page. I feel good about our menu at this point. For now, this is really all we need to do. Coming up next, we'll modify some of the other elements on this page using the same techniques.